Perfect. Thank you, Sebastian, and thank you everyone for joining today's webinar, Transforming Trial Success, AI's Role in Clinical Trial Meta-Analysis. My name is Nick Brown, and I'm a member of the Certara AI team, and we've been focused on the development of AI and large language models for the last 7 years. In that development, we've been focusing on helping life science researchers improve the analysis of difficult to analyze and access content, such as unstructured and semi-structured documents, and being able to use those models to extract specific insights that can help them make greater informed decisions across the clinical landscape. And so we'll focus primarily on some of the applications that we are leveraging those large language models in as part of the CODEX platform within Certara. So this is today's agenda, and we'll be focusing on the way that large language models improve our understanding of the clinical landscape of a given therapeutic area, and how those large language models can enhance the design and outcome of certain trials. We'll start that by discussing the data types that fuel this type of analysis and some of the challenges associated with collecting this data. We'll then discuss Certara's approaches for improving the industry's access to valuable content and ways it can be used to improve our understanding of drug performance for a given trial, including the development of AI-powered data collection tools. And lastly, we'll discuss how data fabrics are a unique architecture for leveraging these models against unstructured data. We'll wrap things up with a demo and of course leave some time for Q&A as well. So one of the most important aspects of to understand is how data is generated throughout the clinical trial lifecycle. And this content is created really from early stage to phase 2 and phase 3 to public trial results and really on to post-marketing surveillance of certain drugs. And this content can include a number of different types of documents being created. So from early stages, it could include things like protocol development and statistical analysis plans to case report forms and recruitment and enrollment content. And then as a trial progresses, those documents become more and more advanced, and they'll include things like plain language summaries and eventually scientific publications and white papers sharing some of the findings from a trial. As that continues to progress and we move past the trial phases, we'll then begin to build out things like clinical study reports and drug labels, and also safety and efficacy reporting. What's important to understand, though, is that this content holds immense value, but the unstructured nature of these documents makes them incredibly challenging to manage and extract insights from. And as a result, we're often faced with having to manually collect these materials and search through each document page by page and line by line. And in many cases, these documents can be tens to hundreds of pages long. And that's a significant time investment just in terms of being able to collect that information as a whole. And so without access to data curation experts, in many cases, key insights are missed in these documents that can help us better inform and understand the overall therapeutic landscape that we may be entering a trial for or looking to understand better. And so in most cases, what organizations turn to are systematic literature reviews, or SLRs. And as with any type of SLR, there are critical methods that are put into place to ensure that a comprehensive and highly specific data set is created. And in doing so, these curated data sets enable researchers to answer critical questions that help identify desired outcomes and the most promising therapeutics that should be entering the market. However, the nature of creating an SLR is very time and labor intensive, especially when considering the level of detail that's required for these reviews, and also the fact that nearly 80% of the data being extracted from those documents is ultimately coming from that unstructured content that we were sharing on the previous slide. And so as a result, in many cases, it can take a team of highly trained researchers an average of 16 months to complete an SLR. And in many cases, those individuals are being taken away from other highly valuable work that they could be focusing on within the organization. And so with industry demands continuing to push for a faster innovation, our ability to accelerate how we gather and deliver this data can improve our understanding of a therapeutic area, ultimately leading to us designing safer and more efficient trials and at the end, accelerating drug development. At Certara, we've been focused on delivering these types of results for customers and accelerating our customers' ability to gain access to this type of data. And so we have an expert team of researchers who focus specifically on delivering this type of SLR-related data to customers. And over the last decade plus, they've developed over 60 of these high-quality indication data sets. And each data set is meticulously developed to include extensive data on study-level details that include information on trial design, patient population characteristics, statistical analyses, efficacy and safety results, and more. And as we've been discussing, the data that's being extracted is coming from publicly available data, much of which we've been exploring so far. So within each of these indication data sets includes content from journal articles and abstracts, conference posters, information on clinicaltrials.gov, company study synopses and redacted CSRs, regulatory documents, investor communications, and other press releases that might be coming out around a given drug or therapeutic area. And so as the team continues to update these data sets, they each are created to meet rigorous standards and ultimately provide our customers and pharmaceutical and life science companies with the insights that they need to determine trial designs, ultimately anticipate outcomes, and ideally improve the types of drugs that they are developing and anticipate potential outcomes or pitfalls that they can avoid based on the trial that they are developing. And so these indication data bases span a variety of different therapeutic areas. And so just sharing a snapshot here, those include therapeutic areas such as the central nervous system and pain, cardiovascular and metabolic disorders, respiratory, infectious disease, immunology, oncology, and ophthalmology as well. And each of these data sets is updated on an annual basis to ensure that you have access to the latest clinical outcomes data and alleviating the time and resource investment spent on conducting this data set collection internally. Ultimately, this allows you to take next steps in your clinical trials much faster versus having to run this type of work in-house, which will delay delivery times and ultimately take highly valuable resources from your organization to focus on this data collection task. And so once you have access to this data, we have an intuitive web-based application for visualizing this content. And so the CODEX platform, which stands for Clinical Outcomes Database Explorer, it combines Certara's expert services and gold standard clinical trial data to make it easier for teams to run statistical analyses and gain overviews of therapeutic areas and common treatments, safety and efficacy endpoints as well. And within the tool are a variety of different graphical interfaces for running these types of analyses. And it provides a singular source for running this type of meta-analysis and MBMA work. And while CODEX already provides clinical trial teams with powerful insights out of the box, we also know that the internal proprietary information that organizations hold can often enrich the data that they have available and enrich the type of analyses that they're looking to run. And so as part of that, what we've done is we've integrated a number of capabilities from Certara AI, most specifically the use of large language models and also data fabric connectivity to enable you to connect in your own proprietary data into this platform and expand the knowledge you have on a therapeutic area by combining the expertly curated Certara indication data sets with your own proprietary data into a single visualization tool. And so as we continue on this presentation, we'll focus largely on that AI-powered data collection, and then also in the second part being that data fabric connectivity as well. And so the proliferation of AI has introduced an exciting shift in how we approach difficult to analyze content. And at Certara AI, we focus largely on the training of large language models to focus on solving that specific challenge. The uniqueness of something like a large language model is in the way that it understands complex content. And so a traditional deep learning model used to have to learn data in sequential order. What large language models do is they learn bidirectionally and understand the full context of the text that they are given access to. What this ultimately means is as that training on that model improves, it can then begin to identify and interpret key information around sentence structure, intenses, and contextual indicators, all of which are key nuances of the human language as a whole. And what that ultimately means is that you have enhanced search accuracy so that the models are finding even richer insights and information from the data that they have access to that otherwise you would have to require manual intervention to have to identify that type of information yourself. And so within Certara AI, we've been using these models for a variety of different tasks, but most specifically with named entity recognition. And so training these models to identify specific life science terms that exist within a specific document. So that may be identifying things like chemicals of biological interest or certain drugs. It may include identifying side effects or disease types, individual names of researchers or locations or companies that are mentioned within this literature. And so with the NER models, they can quickly identify that text and deliver that to you in an easy to identify way. The other areas that we have focused these large language models on are question answering, and we'll go into that in further detail. That's essentially the way of using the large language model to ask a broad question against your data, and the model will go through and extract certain entities from that data and deliver that to you for review. And then lastly, we are building our own generative AI models that will be a private offering so that Certara users can gain access to a GPT model that can run and operate within their secure environment versus having to leverage publicly available models and GPT solutions. And more will come to that in future presentations. So as I was mentioning, the large language model's ability to learn and interpret language makes them incredibly powerful for conducting search and extraction tasks. So for example, in the CODEX platform, we leverage these models for natural language question answering. And the way that it works is a model is served a question that you can enter into the system. And first, the model is going to interpret a specific, the specific question being asked. And then it's going to scan all of the documents that it has access to begin to identify certain answers. So it will interpret a question like, what drugs are being mentioned? In this case, what the model is going to do is find any type of tip and clue as to an answer that might be relevant to it. So in this case, it finds something like anti-diabetic drugs because drugs is mentioned in the question itself, and so it knows to identify that as an answer. But then it's also going to find a more detailed answer like luceoglyphosin. And the way it's able to do that is because of the tagging and cataloging that has already taken place within the CODEX platform so that it knows and understands that that term relates to a specific drug. This can work across a variety of different types of questions and types of insights you're looking to pull from the literature as well, though. And so it may be something like asking what adverse effects are being reported, in which case you can find very rich answers that are found. So in this case, a list of adverse events that are included within the literature. So we see weight gain and edema and lactic acidosis and gastrointestinal disorders. And what you'll notice is that that content has already been tagged by the model as a term of interest, but then also within the literature, there are key indications that would clue the model into finding an answer like that. And so context like major side effects being mentioned in the text provides key context clues for that model to provide a more accurate answer for the question that you're asking. And similar to that, the model's ability to understand greater context and provide more accuracy means that you get more meaningful answers. And so for something like what disease is being studied, instead of just getting diabetes as a result, we get a very rich answer of the type of diabetes being studied. So in this case, type 2 diabetes mellitus. And you can see why that's being identified within the model by the mention of that disease right here. So overall, what this enables you to do, though, is accelerate the ability to find these types of answers using the language model to serve and deliver those predicted answers directly to you via a software solution versus having to manually go through and build out these data sets on your own. And so we've taken these large language models and that we were just discussing, and we deliver them via a low-code interface known as CODEX Curate. What CODEX Curate is a smart spreadsheet technology where you're leveraging these large language models to ask questions on a document-by-document basis. Within it, once you ask questions of the documents, or if you want to extract metadata properties, with each task that you ask the model, it begins to build out a spreadsheet column with the corresponding results that you've asked of it. And so within this capability, you then have the option to build out a structured spreadsheet that matches many of the existing CODEX indication databases that might be in place within your existing organization, so that you can expand the content you have available with your own proprietary data as well. And so once this data set is complete, this gets integrated into the CODEX platform and ultimately expands your view of a specific clinical landscape that you're studying, because you're combining that publicly available data with your own internal proprietary data as well. Now, one of the added benefits of a tool like CODEX Curate is the dataset curation feature. And what this enables you to do is validate predicted results that are delivered by the model. You will see in many cases with natural language question answering that a model may provide multiple predicted answers based on the question that you've asked. And so by having a validation loop within the system, ensures the creation of high quality data sets and also enables you to fine tune the models running within the platform. And so by providing the model feedback, the model can learn and improve its accuracy over time. And we'll walk through this as part of the demo, but for an example, the way that this works is a base model, which has a general understanding based on the information it's been given access to, often runs with an accuracy around 71. However, by going through and validating some of the predicted answers that the large language model has identified, you can quickly fine tune the results, and the accuracy is able to increase quite significantly into the high 90s. And so what that ultimately provides you is with a custom deep learning model that understands the specific therapeutic area of interest that you're studying, while also enabling you to train it on the specific organizational data that you're giving it access to. And so ultimately you can expand your large language model's capabilities and also ensure your trust in that model that it's going to perform to the specific parameters that you're providing to it in a much more desirable fashion. And so as part of the CODEX platform, we've been talking a lot about the ability to connect in your own proprietary data. And that's where the CODEX data fabric comes into place. It just so happens that not only does the ability of connecting those documents help, but it also means that data fabrics can provide an excellent environment for deploying these large language models against those various connected data sources. And so what the CODEX data fabric enables you to do is connect in multiple internal proprietary data sources into the platform without moving or replicating any of the data. So what the data fabric does is once it's gained access to a document, it begins to index some of the data that it's been exposed to, and then the large language models within the data fabric train on the specific content that has now been connected. And so over time, those models are training and learning and improving their understanding of your own proprietary data, and also provides you with specific models that are trained on just specific data types that you've connected into the system. This ultimately provides a singular solution for being able to access each of those individual proprietary data sources that are oftentimes siloed within your organization. And so instead of having to manually extract certain documents that you want to search from, bring those all together and then load them into a system to run any type of text analysis task, you can just leverage the data fabric to identify those specific documents and have those served up to you without having to do any of the manual document collection tasks that you traditionally would be required to perform. And so what this ultimately looks like is as you create multiple connections into your data, into your environment, is that you're able to create a unique data fabric. And so each individual connection has its own large language models living within it that are trained on the specific content that they've been exposed to. And as you create more of those connections, the API within the data fabric enables those connections to talk to each other. And so, as I was mentioning before, that means that you ultimately have a singular searchable source for being able to pull information both from your proprietary documents, but then any of the existing CODEX indication data sets that you might want to gain access to as well. All of those can be available for you in a single data fabric solution. So you can pick and choose the type of data you want available for your given analytics task that you're looking to run. And so as part of this, you then have that data fabric living within it and specific large language models that can be managed and trained on specific data that you're exposing within the data fabric itself. And so at this point, I'll jump over to a brief demo where I can show some of these capabilities in action. Okay, so this is the CODEX platform, and this is the web application, in which case in this tool, you can choose from a variety of different indications that you can subscribe to from Certara. In this case, I'm going to choose Alzheimer's disease. And when selecting that indication database, I'm already able to gain a rich overview of the data that I have access to in that database. And so I can see a summary level of the amount of data that's included, the number of studies that are within the database, the number of study arms, patients, rows of data, and references. I can identify things like common efficacy endpoints or safety endpoints that are existent within the database, as well as certain evidence characteristics. Of course, very important to know, okay, from all of this data, how much of this data consists of information from phase 3 trials or blinded trials or randomized clinical trials. And so having that information available to you can provide that top level understanding of the type of information that you're able to analyze within the specific platform. Now from here, you can run a variety of different statistical analyses where you can do things like time course by study against certain treatments that exist within the system itself, in which case any of the drugs that are mentioned within the database can be investigated here. And you can also update these based on certain drugs that are mentioned within the database. So perhaps I want to run a time course study and I want certain drugs I believe are relevant for what I am developing. If I want something like a randomized drug, and then I want to choose 2 different drugs included in the database, perhaps something like galantamine and cerebrolocin. I can run that analysis and begin to adjust the time course study based on different endpoints that might be of interest to me. And I can begin to see various findings coming from the study that mentioned both galantamine or cerebrolocin. Similarly, you can run this analysis against things like time course by treatment, and begin to identify things like covariate endpoints and also an overview table of the specific data that I have access to within this specific analysis that I'm running. I can also compare things like performance of these two drugs via something like a pairwise meta-analysis, in which case we're going to have a plot that you can begin to investigate and compare based on a study-by-study level. And so again, you might want to run things again and see how a drug is performing against a certain adverse event, in which case I can choose that, and the plot will update itself where I can see common results showing up in each of my individual studies that are included. I can see the weighted average and additional insights that can be pulled from this. Lastly, you can also see things like network meta-analyses where you can begin to identify certain relationships within all of the drugs that are mentioned within this database. And naturally, since this is a large database, it may take a moment to load the full treatment plot, but ultimately what the network analysis and the network plot are meant to do is to begin to see all of the existing relationships that exist within the drugs that are mentioned in the database itself. Within a plot like this, I can begin to zoom in on certain areas of interest and begin to see different relationships that exist within the studies of this database. Now, most of this presentation has really been focused on the data collection process and also the ability to collect information from our own proprietary data as well. And so I want to focus on that portion for this demo. So within the CODEX data visualization app, I can see both a top-level view of the database itself, where I can see references that were included within this database. I can see key insights from each of those studies that are all extracted into a spreadsheet. I can see additional details around database specification, so I can understand what each entity means and how it's defined within the database. And I can also view protocols for how exactly we ran this database collection within the Alzheimer's indication. From there, you can also dive in on a study-by-study basis. And so within each study, I can select each one and I can gain an overview of the study itself, the title of that study, and any additional top-level information related to the study itself. And then I can see a summary of the full data that's been extracted from that individual study. And so by having a visualization into this, I can then take this information in the fields that have been identified from this database and use our CODEX curation tool to extract these same entities from my own internal proprietary data. And so within the CODEX Curate tool, I can then begin to leverage those large language models. And so as you can see, what we've done here is we've created an initial document set that includes any of the documents, in this case, clinical trials that I was interested in that are connected into my platform that mention Alzheimer's disease. And based on the study that I'm running, I may be looking for specific date ranges for publication. So in this case, I'm just looking over roughly the last 5 years. And what I can begin to do is leverage the software and the AI models to identify certain entities that are relevant to that indication database that we were just looking at. And so at first, I may want to find certain metadata properties that are relevant to me. And so in that case, I may want to see things like the patient age list. I may want to see things like who the lead sponsor was or any interventions mentioned within the trial. And I also saw when looking at the study by study level that there's also summary level information included within the database. So perhaps I want the trial summary included. Once I hit save, what the system is going to do is extract all of these properties and deliver them to me in an organized fashion within that spreadsheet tool. So now I have that information available to me. and collected in a fashion that I can easily begin to investigate and have available to export as a CSV. However, what you ultimately find is that while metadata extraction is certainly valuable and can save time, the biggest time suck comes from having to find the additional insights that are of interest that are not mentioned in the metadata. And that's where the large language models come into play. And so by going into the system and leveraging the LLMs, I can begin to ask questions of each of these documents and pull out certain entities of interest. And so perhaps I want to ask things like, what is the study arm of within the document set? Maybe I want to know the treatment regimen, and I want to know what drugs are mentioned. Once I select any questions or ask my own custom question within the system, I'll hit save, and the models are going to go through, find predicted answers, and serve those to me in their own respective spreadsheet column. And so as I look through, I can now see any of the results being found here for me to begin to review and validate. Now, when I was introducing the CODEX Curate solution, I mentioned that human validation in human in the loop curation capability. And so you'll see that available here when I begin to review answers that were found. And so you'll see in some cases that multiple predictions have been identified. Now, one of the powerful things that the tool will do is it will uncover evidence for where a specific answer was found. But then I can also go in and begin to validate certain answers. And so I can see a confidence score that the model has given me that believes an answer is correct. And I can go in and select the term that I believe is most relevant for my given data curation task. And this can work on a variety of different types of terms and entities that we're searching for. So maybe we believe that this is actually the correct answer. This more detailed one is the one that we want. And I can validate that as that given answer. And over time, again, as we do more and more validation, the model will fine tune itself and understand what were the correct answers that we provided it, so that when you run these tools against a larger set of proprietary documents, it's going to improve the outcomes and the results that it's identifying. Now, the last thing worth mentioning within the curation tool is that you are able to find summary level information around key trends that are showing up within each column. So in this case, we're querying a decently large document set of 2,700 documents. But at some point, I may want to just see from that, okay, what are commonalities coming out of this? And so perhaps I want to see the common drugs that are being included. I can quickly find that information and begin to see those trends of the common drugs that are being studied within this document set. And I also have the ability to group those answers based on different ways that that drug may be phrased within the spreadsheet column itself. And I can see the various different terms being used and how those are all being grouped together. And this can all be trained both on the existing semantically similarity capabilities within the system, or also leveraging your own internal dictionaries and ontologies to do this type of answer grouping to identify those types of trends. So once this document set has been curated, I can then export all of this information that will deliver as a CSV that I can then enter into the CODEX platform and make visual to me as part of this database. So not only would I have the ability to view the Alzheimer's disease, but then also a custom database that I have just created side by side with each other, so that I have not only my publicly available CODEX indication data visible within this platform, but then also combine that with my internal proprietary data as well. So just to wrap things up on the CODEX platform as a whole, what this solution is meant to do is combine data fabric connectivity, AI, enrich indication databases to ultimately support go and no-go decisions throughout the clinical trial process. And some of the key benefits that this solution provides is data accessibility, the ability for you to integrate those expertly curated data sets and publicly available content with your own internal clinical data that would be relevant for this type of analysis. The expertly curated data sets and those gold standard insights that are coming from the Certara database team, in having each of those indications available to you at your fingertips to add into any analysis that you're running. Having the ability to run any of those analyses in a low-code environment, both within the CODEX visualization app and having the AI-powered tools, which also come in an intuitive solution so that you can leverage those large language models without necessarily having to be a data scientist or a data curator. You can simply leverage those models to build out those custom spreadsheets on your own. And overall, this is meant to create a intuitive and comprehensive platform where you can run any of your clinical meta-analyses in a single solution versus having to run them in disparate silos themselves and bring it all together, which can ultimately slow down processes and ultimately limit the amount of collaboration that can take place within the organization itself. And so with that, I know we're coming up a bit on time, so I did want to pause there and leave some time for Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, for that great presentation. Super insightful. As a reminder to the audience, please submit your questions through chat pane and we will address them. And a couple of questions already came through during the presentation, and let's start with that one. What is the literature-based evidence source you used? Was it PubMed? And I think that refers to the demo.
Sure. Yep. So that's a great question. So what we were leveraging in the demo environment is a solution called Certara's reference data fabric. What the reference data fabric is a pre-indexed tool of publicly available biomedical literature. So in this case, I was searching against clinicaltrials.gov, which is one of the sources that has been indexed within that reference data fabric. However, we also index preprint literature, PubMed, PubChem, PubMed Open Access, the US Patent Office, NIE data, and are continuing to expand that into some additional data sources as well over time. So that's the type of literature we were running, search we were running against. However, this same solution works against internal proprietary documents as well. So if you were to connect a repository of internal PDFs, the same solution, the same workflow would work against that type of text extraction as well.
All right, thank you. Next question that came through. Can you share more detail on Certara's use of large language models? Are these similar to ChatGPT?
Sure, absolutely. That's a great question. So within Certara, we're focused on really we're staying at the cutting edge of the evolution of large language models. And so traditionally, we had focused on that Q&A and extractive use of large language models, like you were seeing in the CODEX Curate demo, where the large language model was interpreting a task and then going out and finding predicted answers from the documents it had access to. However, we are also in the process of training private transformers for generative purposes, so creating a similar GPT model that can be used in a private setting in a secure environment by our customers. And one of the benefits of that is that GPT is also being trained specifically for life sciences content, so that it has a much greater understanding of the type of information that we are searching for within our industry. The other item that is important related to that is we understand the importance of being able to reference where answers are coming from a generative model. And so we're working on focusing on delivering the capability of being able to reference exactly where the GPT was finding its answers so that you have that traceability back to the source content should you need it.
Okay, thank you. Another question came through. What are some successful pharma use cases in using this system? Question.
Sure, absolutely. So we have a number of pharma customers who are entering in phase 2 or phase 3 trials and would be leveraging the CODEX indication databases to understand and predict potential outcomes as their drug enters in those highly critical next phases of their trial. And so in many cases, what a pharma company will do is engage with the CODEX team, both from the platform perspective so that they can interpret their own internal proprietary data in the indication data, as well as working with our consulting team so that they can have an additional expert on the within the group to provide certain MBMA and model-based meta-analysis studies and results to the customer so that they can accelerate and also change and switch trial designs as they need to ensure that drug is meeting the standards it needs to hit regulatory approval. And so unfortunately, you know, in a setting like this, I can't get into specific clients, but that's typically the type of approach and the way that customers are engaging with a platform like CODEX today.
Oh, great, thank you for covering that question. Let's take another one here from the chat. What happens to our data once it's connected to the CODEX platform?
Yep. Great question. Of course, highly important, particularly when entering your own proprietary data into a solution like this. The CODEX platform is delivered in a secure hosted environment. And so what that means is that you as a customer only have VPN access to that information. And so it is not a multi-tenant solution, and none of the data comes back to Certara. Instead, the data resides within whatever connected data source you've added for the data fabric and remains just there. And so we ensure that any of that content that is being created or extracted from remains within your secure hosted environment and in no way comes back to any of the other solutions within Certara itself.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Nick. And that was it. So I don't see any more questions. And we are in time, so I think we can wrap it up for today. Again, so this webinar has been recorded, and we will send you the recording within the next few days. And if you have further questions, feel free to reach out to Nick or the Certara team. We will be happy to address them. And with that, again, Nick, thanks for the great presentation. Thank you for the engagement, for the interaction. With that, have a good day.